So today we're going to be talking about the time I tried to take over my school's Minecraft server. And as a bored AP comparative government student, I decided to, shall we say, form a case study, which ultimately resulted in the collapse of a government, multiple acts of political sabotage, mass famine, your everyday Minecraft server stuff. But before we get there, let's start where it all began. You see, at first, we just all lived near spawn. We built a main base, started mining, got a crop farm going, and for a while, everything was relatively peaceful. Until it wasn't. Because following a major theft incident, a small group of players decided they had enough, and that it was time to break away from spawn. So they left, traveling thousands of blocks away to begin work on a new, secret, underground base. Honestly, they couldn't have picked a better time to leave, because spawn was getting worse. Fast. At one point, basically everyone was mad at these two guys who were controlling like 90% of the resources. So if you wanted something, they probably had it, and you'd probably have to pay for it. So yeah, when news of this mysterious underground settlement started spreading, people left, and they kept leaving. Eventually, spawn was no longer the center of civilization. This new underground base was. And seeing this as an opportunity, the founder decided to do something any normal Minecraft player in his shoes would. And that's to create a government. Yeah, he promised that under his eye, there wouldn't be any of this wealth hoarding nonsense, okay? He promised communal farms and communal storage, and that everything would be done for the interest of the people. And now that a new nation was born, it needed a name. So someone proposed that since they were basically the land down under, they call themselves Australia. And soon enough, the first Australian election was held. Naturally, the founder won, becoming its first president. And as president, his first and really only executive decision was to sponsor a construction company. And you gotta understand something, man. Under his command, this base was expanding like crazy. New farms appeared constantly. New rooms got carved out daily. Infrastructure expanded faster than anybody could have imagined. And for the first time since the server started, things were actually going really well. But I knew that the president wouldn't be in power for long. I mean, after all, he did create a democracy. So that got me thinking, because, Australia had a government now, which meant that, eventually, somebody else would become the president. And then I had an idea. It would be really funny if I could somehow establish a dictatorship. Now, just to be crystal clear, I wasn't planning on running as some Dante-adjacent figure where I was super vague about my platform, nor was I going to run as a normal candidate than Polo 180. In fact, I wasn't even planning on hiding my authoritarian flavor, because AP Comparative Government teaches many valuable lessons. And one of those lessons is create problems, then solve problems. Because if people are scared enough, they'll usually pay more attention to the person fixing the problem than the amount of power that person suddenly has. So valuable resources started disappearing. Like diamonds, iron, emeralds, all vanishing without a trace. The people were outraged, and rightfully so, because someone had apparently gone through Australia systematically raiding chests. Now, obviously, I took this extremely seriously, mostly because I was the one stealing everything. I had personally emptied chest after chest, taken basically anything valuable I could find. Thankfully, though, I was also there to pledge stronger security measures in the enforcement of property rights. Then, food shortages started happening, which was highly concerning. I mean, some monster had killed all the cows and sheep, and the massive wheat farm had been completely uprooted. Nobody had the courtesy of replanting any of it. And one by one, every other crop was starting to disappear too. From chests, from shulker boxes, it was a humanitarian disaster. For everybody except me, of course. Because while the nation descended into agricultural collapse, I was already preparing a solution. Potatoes. Tons of potatoes. Mass potato production. Because fortunately for Australia, I had engineered a society where potatoes were now the only remaining option. People were also getting pretty tired of doing everything themselves. Who would want to go spend hours mining? Nobody wanted to gather resources constantly. They wanted convenience. So I gave it to them. Need resources? I'll go get them. Need materials? I'll handle it. Need help building? With pleasure. Because one of the best ways to gain political support is doing things for people. And I think by now you get the point. When people had problems, I had solutions. And because of that, people liked me. A lot. By the time the second election was approaching, I was easily the most popular candidate. But there was one small, tiny, absolutely infinitesimal problem. The election was still a week away, and by this point, my entire campaign strategy depended on there being problems. Because if shortages suddenly stopped, people might start to ask questions. And if things suddenly became stable, people might wonder why. So I found myself in a pretty tough spot because the machine I built only worked if I kept feeding it. Now, AP Comparative Government teaches another valuable lesson. Fear creates instability, and instability creates opportunities. So I created an unknown actor, by which I mean I became an unknown actor. I'd travel to bases belonging to those still living outside of Australia, break their beds, and then leave signs reading, "Pillaged in the name of Australia! Glory to Australia!" Because if there's one thing scarier than outside threats, it's realizing that the threat might be within your own nation. Consequently, I also added investigating these incidents to my platform because somebody had to stop this faceless criminal. As I continued causing problems and magically creating solutions, I began to realize that I wasn't the only one making issues. Like, sure, I was arguably the biggest actor, but the admins knew about my nonsense. And they thought it was pretty funny, because despite everything, I wasn't actually meaningfully destroying people's progress. But other people were, and they weren't interested in political theater. Like, they killed pets, they destroyed bases, they actually made people angry, and eventually the players got fed up. I campaigned on investigation, I campaigned on accountability, but at the end of the day, none of it mattered. The people wanted answers, so they convinced the admins to install logging plugins. Plugins that record everything from who broke a block to who killed something. Now, at this point, you could probably see where this is going. But I couldn't. I mean, at the time, I had no idea the server now had logs detailing my every move. Now, fast forward to 2 days before the second election, and one player had become heavily dissatisfied with the state of roleplay on the server. So they decided it was time for action. There would be no roleplay in their sandbox survival game. So in a fit of righteous anger, they declared war on Australia. And normally this wouldn't have been a big deal, because Australia was like 10 strong and most of them had maxed gear. But this player was stacked beyond belief. Like, I'm talking end crystals, totems, potions, everything. A few people tried fighting, but it didn't really go well for him. So it wasn't long before the president realized something pretty obvious. I mean, if this escalated any further, then there wouldn't be a nation left to govern, nor would there be people with items. So reluctantly, he agreed to come to the table and negotiate with the opposing side in an attempt to calm things down before the entire server descended into chaos. And what followed was a tense back-and-forth discussion. And among the long list of demands, one in particular stood above the rest: the complete dissolution of the Australian government. There was no compromise, just the expectation that Australia as it existed would cease to function as a nation. And after a pretty long pause, considering the fact that continued resistance would probably just make things worse, the president agreed. And with that, Australia was no more. What, did you think I was just about to give up on my dream of authoritarian rule? No, I needed a new plan, and this time, it had to work without stable institutions to exploit. So I decided to stage a revolutionary movement. Light griefing, designed to feel like something bigger was on the horizon. I started placing signs everywhere reading "Viva la Revolution," trying to manufacture an uprising against the now-dissolved government. But it followed the same principles as before: create an actor, then present myself as the solution. However, this only works if people actually believe there's a real threat behind it. So I made sure that there was one. You see, the same player who had just forced the dissolution had also at one point stolen horses from Australian citizens. And it wasn't even subtle or anything, just straight up horse theft. So I decided to take things a step further and killed the horses in cold blood. And funnily enough, the same person that stole the horses discovered the aftermath, so I doubled down on the framing. I spun it as a self-report. And I even had an alibi ready. At the time of discovery, I was thousands of blocks out getting some nether wart. And I wasn't alone either, there were people with me. So at that point, there was no way it couldn't have been me. My defense was completely airtight. At least I thought it was. Because the person I was trying to frame knew something I didn't. The server had logs, okay? So instead of trying to defend themselves in the old-fashioned way, they went straight to the admins and asked for the logs. And with that, my cover was blown. The jig was up. But I wasn't done fighting yet. because earlier in the server's history, one of the admins thought it would be funny to give me a bow with power 50. It had one durability, clearly meant to be like a gun with one bullet sort of thing, so I repaired it, and I kept it, because I felt that at some point in time, it'd come in handy. And with my cover completely blown, my schemes exposed to the masses, I had what was essentially the most broken weapon on the entire server. Like, I could cut through players in full Prot 4 Diamond like they were butter. So I went on a rampage, and for a brief moment, the server devolved into absolute chaos. People were scrambling everywhere, Australia was being evacuated. Everyone realized way too late that I wasn't gonna fall like a feather, I was gonna fall like a chump. But my excitement was pretty short-lived, because the server owner made a big announcement. A trial was gonna be held soon, and not just anywhere. In the courthouse I personally had built. And just like that, I wasn't the judge, I wasn't the jury, I wasn't even the executioner. I was the defendant. The server owner finally had enough, and instead of just deleting my bow, he decided to turn me into a public display. With that, the trial began. The jury, the ones I'd murdered, the judge, the owner himself. And me, I had no lawyer. I tried pleading my Fifth Amendment right to counsel, but there was just one small issue. I wasn't in America. And the trial itself also had no defense phase, no cross-examination, no chance to argue context or intent, so it was less legal proceeding and more structured recount of everything I'd done. I didn't even get a chance to speak in my own defense. By now, everyone knew I was guilty, or at least everyone knew I was guilty of the horse murder and the faux revolution. But the server owner made sure everyone was aware of my political shenanigans as well. Most players were shocked to realize I was behind it all. You know, the economic collapse and the missing valuables and the deliberate starvation. Most of it had stayed in the background. But now it was all connected. And now they knew. And confusion turned into realization, and from realization came anger. And by the time the list of charges finished, no one was calling for my imprisonment anymore. They demanded execution. So the judge delivered his verdict. I was to be locked in a bedrock cell right in the middle of the Australian base. Then a server-wide message was sent out to every player. Just like that, it was over. My 5-day plan thwarted. Everything I'd carefully built and manipulated into existence crumbled before me. The server owner went through and stripped me of everything I had accumulated, redistributing it among the player base. Well, everything except for the Power 50 bow, for obvious reasons, that stayed firmly out of reach. All I was left with was a single lava bucket. I wasn't entirely sure if he just missed it or if he left it in my inventory for no reason, but I placed it down inside my cell, and then I just started repeatedly respawning, because there wasn't much left to do, except make noise, so I did the only thing that would still affect the entire server. I flooded the chat. Everybody eventually logged on, and then the owner gathered everyone around my cell. Then, he asked me how I wanted to be executed. So, I chose the only fitting option. I wanted to be killed with the very Power 50 bow I'd used to wreak havoc across the server. Death message appeared in chat, and I was promptly banned. And just like that, my political experiment had concluded in a fantastic display of defeat. And that weekend, we all went out to get some ice cream.